Hello and welcome to Empire of Wargames. My name is Eplesh and this is the last video of the Silver Templars week. We are going to talk about the paint scheme, conversions and some tricks I discovered while working on the army myself. If you enjoy what you see, consider supporting the channel on Ko-Fi. The link is down in the description below. Alright, let's go. Alright, so first up I'd like to mention that I'd obviously rather show you a real painting tutorial with me painting the miniature, but I don't have the setup for that right now. The money I get from donations on Ko-Fi or later on Patreon will go directly into that. So for now, you'll have to live with my descriptions and some images. Alright, so I've been painting Silver Templars myself and discovered tips and tricks that I wanted to share. As you can see at first glance, Silver Templars seem simple and the paint scheme looks insanely straightforward, almost to the point where you can compare them to Necrons, but don't let that fool you. Alright, let's go in order. After assembling the miniature, the ideal step is to use lead belcher spray or any other primer that is a darker silver. In my experience, an undercoat of Chaos Black or a black primer is not 100% necessary, but it will make the silver pop a little bit more. I would say that if you're on a budget, you skip the Chaos Black step, because it's not that noticeable and it's not 100% worth the money you're getting for such a tiny adjustment. And if you're worried about just lead belcher scratching off, well, the thing I can tell you is that it never happened to me and I've played my fair share of games with my miniatures, so yeah, take my word for it. After priming your miniature, you have two options. Either you pin shade, which basically means you are using a brush with a sharp tip and only apply the Nuln oil or the darker shade directly into the recesses, or you wash all over. That's the second option. The first method requires more time, but the end result is cleaner. Meanwhile, the second option is super quick, but obviously not as clean. Generally, I use the first method for my characters and the second method for anything that is a unit with 3 or more models. The subtle difference really helps make characters stand out without being an eyesore because they look completely different. This method is also very helpful for Necrons if you happen to play those, especially if you want to make your Necrons cleaner the higher their standing is, because that's part of the lore actually and makes even more sense there. After that, you dry brush or highlight with Iron Breaker and Runefang Steel. You could use Stormhouse Silver obviously, but it's way too bright for my taste personally. I prefer subtle highlights, especially when it comes to metallics. Metallics and highlights are really a complex topic and should be just used sparingly, and highlights should be very, very thin and fine. So try to make it look as clean as you possibly can. So the quickest way to just get over with the silver is to just prime lead belcher, throw in some Nuln oil or non-oil gloss depending on your personal preference on the entire miniature, and then dry brush with Runefang Steel. It takes about 3 minutes, the metal on your miniature is done and it looks great. So if you have 30 intercessors to paint, this might be the best way to approach it. A quick thing I would also suggest experimenting with if you have test miniatures is to trial Nuln oil gloss, or maybe even contrast paints like Basilicanum Grey to check out which style you prefer best, because all of them are viable and all of them look great, so it's up to personal taste here. Now to the more complex topic. I obviously want as many players as possible to play Silver Templars, but the paint scheme is not as simple as it looks. Painting yellows is nothing that really requires magic, that would be heresy anyway, but it requires a ton of patience. If you want a quick yellow with say a coat of Avalon Sunset and then a coat of Yandan Yellow, there are two scenarios. One is that it will barely cover and you'll see the lead belcher primer through it, or you put so much on that it's splodgy and you can even see the shoulder pauldron deforming a little bit because there's so much paint on it. My recommendation is usually to batch paint this part. Grab as many marines as you can, as many obviously primed marines, and put 2 thin layers of Avalon Sunset on those parts, on the yellow parts, usually the shoulder pauldrons, the aquila, and sometimes a knee piece if you want to. And when it comes to shading, it comes down to preference again. Some like Agrex Earthshade, other like Zephyrum Sepia for their yellows. I personally prefer Cassandra Yellow because I'm a big fan of warmer yellow tones, and this exactly gives it more a orange yellow kind of tone, which I personally prefer. Then once you are done with that, you throw 2 or 3 thin coats of a Yandan Yellow on there and you're good to go. if you want to be real fancy, you can highlight some spots with Flash Gits Yellow as well. So yeah, it takes time to get yellows done and make them look great, but it's generally worth it. It's obviously way easier if you have an airbrush, but I'm assuming that around 90% of the people in the hobby don't have one. So I won't suggest anything airbrush related here, because usually people who have an airbrush are way more advanced and they usually know what they're doing and what kind of yellow they're going for. Then there are the eyes. They are usually depicted in yellow for Silver Templars, but I personally painted them red. It's completely up to you. If you want a simple way to do it though, just use some Corex white on the eyes of the miniature, let it dry, and then use a contrast paint with the color you prefer. It's usually very clean, very simple, as the contrast paint adjusts to the eye socket or whatever, to the lens, and it will look good. It's simple and easy. And as for the last tip of the painting tutorial part, is that I don't use Abaddon Black. I use Corvus Black. And this has two main reasons and one not so main reason. You can actually shade Corvus Black with Nuln Oil and notice a difference, which makes it look really cool and clean. And it's way easier to highlight and make look good, in my personal opinion. Abaddon Black is a very unforgiving color and it's difficult to make look good with highlighting and dry brushing, and you really need to work on it, whereas Corvus Black is way more forgiving. And the third one, and it's not really a reason, is I just prefer the hue of Corvus Black over Abaddon Black on power armor specifically. Now, one thing a lot of people painting Silver Templars, at least what I noticed when scrolling through Twitter and Google, is that the chest plate of Silver Templars is in fact black, and the Aquila on top of it is yellow. So a lot of people are not painting the chest plate black because it's a lot of hassle. Usually when your miniature is already assembled, it's difficult to get in there. But I personally think it's worth the 2 minutes of hassle and then cleaning up, because it just makes the yellow on the Aquila pop way more, and it also divides the power armor up a little bit. It's not just a plain silver with some intensely colored shoulder patterns that look completely different than the complete rest of the armor, but rather make it look cohesive as one, color scheme. I just personally prefer it. You can skip it if you're really in a hurry, but yeah, I wouldn't suggest it. And that's basically it for the paint scheme. I talked a lot about specific, but I thought if you are curious to hear how I painted mine, I'd offer some in-depth advice. Question in the comments are always welcome though, so ask away. Alright, when it comes to kit bashing, you have basically infinite options for your miniatures. Popular choices are using the Dark Angels upgrade sprue. Almost all the little details and bits are usable. But most importantly, the pointing arm, the sword, and the tilting shield with the sword on it. It's expensive for just a few bits, but it's useful to get at least one of them for a Silver Templars lieutenant or a captain, or at least one conversion. Then there are conversions like this one. This is the body of Torgaradon, the helmet from Marnius Kargar, and the arms from the older Gravis captain that was part of Dark Imperium. Lastly, there is the tilting plate I was talking about earlier from the Dark Angels upgrade sprue. This is an easy and cohesive way to just create a kit bash that looks very like something GW would sell themselves, because it's all GW parts. Now, there are obviously also resin parts. Some people are 3D printing, and I will talk a little bit about that at the end of the video and continue on for now. When it comes to this specific example, it's an expensive list of bits if you are planning to only buy them for the purpose of converting the model. But if you buy Karga, for example, for the helmet, you can easily use him with your Silver Templars if you use your models as Ultramarines. Silver Templars are an Ultramarine successor, and I don't see any reason why you couldn't just use them as Ultramarines and have Marnius Kargar be your HQ choice for that specific army or that specific game. So yeah, you are not just buying Marnius Kargar like a 42 euro model just to get the helmet. That's a little bit ridiculous. So try to make use of the models or of the other bits those models offer when you buy them for kit bashing. Now, when it comes to websites you could check out for conversions, I possibly recommend Shapeways. They offer a wide variety of resin parts. They don't have a lot Silver Templars specific parts. They do have some. They have parts for shoulder pauldrons, for vehicles, and they do have a thing or there here. But in general, they offer a lot of cool helmets, and other bits to differentiate your squads, for example, and that would be especially helpful for Crusade. Now, the other thing that is very important but very difficult to get, the Silver Templars transfer sheet. This thing has a legendary drop rate, and thus neither you or me will get this one, at least not the original one. Gladly's Campwork for Customs offers transfer sheets for Silver Templars and many other factions. I'm using them right now and they look brilliant and they are easy to use. So if you have something in specific in mind when it comes to transfers, or if you want to just get Silver Templar transfer sheets without much hassle, message him. The link is down in the description below. And that's really all I can add for conversions right now. If you have cool ideas, drop them in the comments. If you have any questions, of course, as well. And yeah, any kit that includes a power sword without any obvious symbols of other chapters is a Silver Templars conversion waiting to happen. Now, lastly, I'd like to thank everyone for watching and supporting these little projects, and especially Empire of Wargames as a whole, by just being here, watching videos, dropping comments, and giving likes. It means a lot, and I hope you will continue enjoying my content in the future as well. 800 subscribers in a rather short amount of time is really a cool thing, and I hope we can hit 1000 soon. So if you have any feedback about the week and any of the concepts or ideas I talked about, like the Patreon exclusive content, my support on Ko-Fi, or the format of the week and the videos and how it's laid out, tell me in the comments. I would greatly appreciate that. Thanks for watching and I see you in the next video. Bye bye.